The sound of a hand striking flesh is unmistakable. It cuts through the chatter of $1 billion in net worth like a gunshot. In the middle of the Obsidian Gala, Preston Sterling, the man on the cover of Forbes this month, didn't just slap a waitress. He slapped the one person in the room who could destroy his entire empire with a single phone call. He thought she was a thief. He thought she was nobody. He was about to find out that nobody was the most powerful person in the room. This is the story of how a billionaire's arrogance cost him everything, and why you should never judge someone by their uniform. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue didn't smell like food. It smelled of old money, heavy perfume, and fear. Maya adjusted the collar of her stiff, black uniform. It was 2 sizes too big, chafing against her neck. But she didn't complain. At 22, with dark circles under her eyes that even concealer couldn't hide, she was invisible. To the people in this room, titans of industry, tech moguls and European heiresses, she was nothing more than a moving furniture piece that dispensed champagne and hors d'oeuvres. "Sparkling or still?" she asked for the 100th time that hour, her voice a soft, practiced hum. "Still, and don't spill it," a woman in a red Vera Wang gown snapped, not even looking at Maya's face. She snatched the glass, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the chandelier's light. Maya nodded, receding into the shadows. "Of course, ma'am." Her feet throbbed. She had been on them for 10 hours straight. Her manager, a sweaty, anxious man named Gorski, had threatened to dock their pay if they sat down for even a minute. This was the Obsidian Gala, the most exclusive charity event in New York City. A single ticket cost more than Maya's entire year of tuition at Columbia University. But Maya wasn't just here for the tuition money. She was here because she was running. Running from a life she wasn't ready to accept. Running from a legacy that felt like a cage. For 3 years she had lived in a cramped apartment in Queens, going by her mother's maiden name, working double shifts, proving to herself that she could survive without the safety net her father had tried to force upon her. Across the room, standing near the ice sculpture, was Preston Sterling. If Maya was invisible, Preston was the sun everyone orbited. At 45, he was the CEO of Ether Dynamics, a tech firm on the verge of a merger that would make him the richest man in the Western Hemisphere. He was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline, manicured stubble, and eyes that darted around the room like a shark scanning for blood. He was sweating. Maya noticed it as she passed by, with a fresh tray of smoked salmon blinis. Preston was clutching a tumbler of scotch, so hard his knuckles were white. He was talking in hushed, aggressive tones to his VP of operations, a man named Silas. "The prototype is in my jacket," Preston hissed, patting his breast pocket. "Do you have any idea what happens if the Japanese delegation doesn't see it tonight? The deal dies, Silas. And if the deal dies, the SEC investigation starts." "Keep your voice down, Preston," Silas whispered, looking around nervously. "You're paranoid. Nobody knows about the liquidity issues." "Everyone knows," Preston snapped, taking a massive gulp of scotch. "That's why I need to show them the Kronos chip. It's the only leverage I have left." Maya slowed her pace slightly. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. It was a hazard of the job. Waitresses were part of the wallpaper. People said things in front of them they wouldn't say to their own priests. She caught snippets of bankruptcy, fraud, and one last chance. Preston Sterling, the golden boy of Wall Street, was drowning. And he was dangerous. Maya turned to head back to the kitchen, her tray now empty. As she navigated the sea of tuxedos, she felt a vibration in her pocket. It was her phone. She knew who it was. She ignored it. She had ignored his calls for 3 years. She wasn't about to answer now, not while carrying a tray of dirty napkins. "Hey, you!" The voice was loud, slurred, and directed at her. Maya froze. She turned to see a young man, clearly drunk, swaying slightly. It was Julian Thorpe, the son of a media tycoon. He had a reputation for being handsy. "Yes, sir," Maya said, stepping back. "Where's the lobster?" Julian stumbled forward, his eyes glazing over her form. "And why are you so pretty for a servant? You hiding something?" He reached out, grabbing her arm. His grip was clammy and tight. "Sir, please let go," Maya said, her voice firm but quiet. She couldn't cause a scene. Gorski would fire her instantly. "Don't tell me what to do," Julian laughed, pulling her closer. "I could buy this hotel and turn it into a parking lot." Suddenly, a body slammed into them. It wasn't a rescue. It was a collision. Preston Sterling, blind with stress and rushing toward the VIP room to meet the Japanese investors, had rounded the corner too fast. He plowed into Maya and Julian. The crash was catastrophic. Maya lost her footing. The heavy silver tray in her hand flew upwards. Champagne glasses from a nearby table shattered, and a glass of red wine, a deep, staining Cabernet, launched into the air and splashed directly onto Preston Sterling's pristine, white tuxedo shirt. The music didn't stop, but the silence that radiated from that corner was deafening. Preston stood there, his chest heaving, red wine dripping down his shirt like a fresh wound. He looked down at the stain, then at Maya, who was on her knees, picking up shards of glass, her hands trembling. Then Preston patted his chest pocket. His face went from angry to ghostly pale. "It's gone," he whispered. He frantically patted his sides, then the floor. "The chip, the Kronos chip, it's gone." His eyes snapped to Maya. She was the only one who had been close enough, the only one who had bumped him, the only one on the floor near his feet. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, psychotic rage. He needed a scapegoat. He needed someone to blame for the fact that his life was falling apart. "You!" Preston snarled. Maya looked up, a shard of glass cutting into her thumb. "Sir, I'm so sorry Shut up!" Preston roared. The sound stopped the band. The violin screeched to a halt. 300 heads turned towards them. Preston loomed over her, his expensive Italian shoes crunching on the broken glass. "You bumped me on purpose. A pickpocket trick. Classic." "What?" Maya's eyes widened. "No, sir. It was an accident. He pulled me." She pointed toward Julian, but the coward had already melted back into the crowd, leaving her alone in the spotlight. "Don't lie to me." Preston grabbed Maya's arm, hauling her up from the floor with bruising force. "Where is it? Where did you put it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya cried out, trying to pull away. "I didn't take anything." "The prototype!" Preston was shouting now, spit flying from his mouth. He was unraveling. The stress of the failed merger, the debt, the lies. It was all exploding onto this girl. "You stole the chip from my pocket when you fell. Give it to me." Security guards were rushing over, bulky men in dark suits, but Preston waved them off. He was manic. He grabbed Maya's apron pockets and ripped them open. Napkins and corks fell to the floor. "Sir, stop! You're hurting me," Maya pleaded. She looked around the room, begging for help with her eyes. She saw pity. She saw amusement. She saw people recording with their phones. But she saw no help. To them, she was just help. Expendable. "Empty your pockets!" Preston screamed. "I don't have it!" Preston didn't think. He reacted. The rage overtook him. Smack. He backhanded her. It wasn't a light tap. It was a full-force strike across her face. Maya's head snapped to the side. The sound echoed off the marble walls, sharp and sickening. A collective gasp went through the room. Even the jaded socialites covered their mouths. Maya stumbled back, clutching her cheek. Her skin burned, tears instantly welling in her eyes. She tasted copper. He had split her lip. She stood there, stunned, her breath catching in ragged sobs. She wasn't Maya, the architecture student, anymore. She wasn't Maya, the independent woman. She was a scared girl being assaulted by a billionaire in front of New York's elite. "You thief!" Preston spat, adjusting his ruined jacket. "You filthy little thief! You think you can steal from me?" Gorski, the manager, arrived, breathless and pale. Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. We will handle this immediately. Police! Someone call the police! I want her arrested." Preston pointed a shaking finger at Maya. "And I want her strip searched. She has corporate property worth $50 million on her." 2 security guards grabbed Maya, pinning her arms behind her back. "No, please!" Maya sobbed, struggling uselessly against their grip. "Check the floor! I didn't take it! I swear!" "Get her out of my sight!" Preston turned away, disgust written all over his face. "And Gorski, if that chip isn't found, I will buy this catering company just to burn it to the ground and sue every single one of you into poverty." The guards began to drag Maya toward the service exit. Her feet dragged on the carpet. She looked at the faces of the crowd, men in tuxedos watching her like she was a criminal, women looking at her with disdain. She felt a fire ignite in her chest. It started small, fueled by the sting on her cheek, but it grew rapidly into an inferno. It was the indignity, the injustice, the absolute arrogance of this man who thought his bank account gave him the right to strike her. She stopped struggling. She planted her feet. "Wait," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a strange, resonant quality that cut through the murmurs. The guards paused, surprised by the sudden change in her demeanor. Maya lifted her head. A red mark was blooming violently on her pale cheek. Blood trickled from her lip. But her eyes were dry now, and they were cold as ice. "You want to call the police?" Maya said, looking directly at Preston's back. "Go ahead. But before you do, I want to make a phone call." Preston turned around slowly, laughing a humorless, cruel laugh. "A phone call? Who are you going to call? Your public defender? Your boyfriend who drives a Honda?" The crowd tittered nervously. Maya shook her head. She shook off the guards' hands. They let go, confused by the sudden authority radiating from this waitress. "No," Maya said. She reached into her pocket, the one Preston hadn't ripped, and pulled out a cracked iPhone. "I'm going to call my father." Preston smirked. "Oh, I'm terrified. Is your daddy going to come beat me up? Does he work in sanitation?" "Something like that," Maya murmured. She unlocked her phone. Her fingers hovered over a contact named simply Dad. She hadn't pressed this button in 3 years. She had sworn she never would. She wanted to make it on her own. She wanted to be Maya Linwood, not Maya Kensington. But Preston Sterling had crossed a line. He hadn't just insulted her. He had physically assaulted her. He had humiliated her. And he was trying to ruin her life over a mistake he made. She pressed the call button. She put the phone to her ear. The room was silent. Everyone watching the spectacle of the desperate waitress making her last stand. It rang once. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. A voice that was known to presidents, prime ministers, and the very bankers Preston Sterling owed money to. A voice that sounded like gravel crunching under a Rolls-Royce. "Maya?" the voice on the other end said. It sounded shocked. "Is that you?" "Daddy," Maya said, her voice breaking just a little, the only sign of weakness she allowed. "I'm at the Pierre, the Obsidian Gala." "I know the event," her father said. His voice instantly shifted from shock to alertness. "Why are you there? I thought you were in class. Is everything all right?" Maya looked Preston Sterling dead in the eye. Preston was checking his watch, looking bored. "No, Daddy," Maya said clearly. "I'm not all right. A man named Preston Sterling just slapped me in the face and accused me of theft in front of 500 people." The silence on the other end of the line was terrifying. It wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence of a gathering storm. "He did what?" The voice dropped an octave. It was a growl now. "He hit me, Daddy, and he's having his security drag me out." Preston laughed loudly. "Tell him I'll sue him too if he interrupts me." Maya held the phone out so her father could hear Preston's laugh. "Put him on speaker," her father commanded. "Now?" Maya tapped the speaker button and held the phone up like a weapon. "He wants to talk to you." Preston rolled his eyes and stepped forward, looming over her. "Listen here, whoever this is. I am Preston Sterling, CEO of Ether Dynamics. Your daughter is a thief and a clumsy fool. If you waste my time, I will ensure she never works in this city again." The voice from the tiny speaker was calm, distinct, and terrifyingly familiar to half the people in the room. "Mr. Sterling, this is Alexander Kensington." Preston froze. The glass of scotch he had picked up slipped from his fingers. It didn't shatter. It bounced on the carpet, spilling amber liquid everywhere. The room went from silent to a vacuum. All the air was sucked out. Alexander Kensington, the Iron Lion of global banking, the man whose venture capital firm owned the debt of half the companies in the room, the man who, rumors said, could crash the stock market before breakfast if he was in a bad mood, and more importantly, the man who held the mortgage on Preston Sterling's entire company. Preston's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I'm sorry? Who?" "Alexander Kensington," the voice repeated, colder this time. "You just struck my daughter. I am 2 blocks away at the St. Regis. I suggest you do not move a single muscle until I get there, because if she has so much as a scratch on her when I arrive, I will not just bankrupt you, Sterling. I will erase you." The line went dead. Maya lowered the phone. She looked at Preston. The blood had drained from his face so completely he looked like a corpse. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed a table for support. Kensington," he whispered, looking at the waitress in the oversized uniform. You're a Kensington." Maya wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand. "I am," she said, "and you're in a lot of trouble." The 5 minutes that followed were the longest of Preston Sterling's life. The ballroom of the Pierre, usually a cacophony of clinking glasses and performative laughter, had become a tomb. The air conditioning seemed to hum louder. Every eye was fixed on 2 people, the billionaire in the ruined tuxedo, sweating profusely, and the waitress with the swelling jaw, standing tall in an ill-fitting uniform. The power dynamic in the room hadn't just shifted, it had violently inverted. Preston was the first to break the silence. His natural arrogance tried to reassert itself, but it came out fractured and desperate. "Maya." "Miss Kensington," Preston stammered, taking a step toward her, his hands raised in a placating gesture. This is a terrible misunderstanding. The stress of the evening, the merger. You must understand, the Kronos prototype is vital to national security interests." I reacted poorly. Maya didn't move. She didn't flinch away from him this time. She just looked at him with the cold, detached appraisal of someone watching a bug struggle on its back. "You didn't react poorly, Mr. Sterling," Maya said, her voice steady despite the throbbing pain in her cheek. "You reacted criminally. You assaulted me because you thought I was powerless. You thought I was someone who couldn't fight back." Gorski, the catering manager who minutes ago was ready to fire Maya and hand her to the police, was now practically vibrating with terror. He materialized at Maya's elbow, offering a clean linen napkin filled with ice. "Ms. Maya, please," Gorski whispered, his voice cracking. "Here for your face." I had no idea. If I had known... Maya ignored the ice. She ignored Gorski. Her eyes remained locked on Preston. "I don't want your apologies, Preston," she said, using his first name without the honorific, a subtle power move that made him flinch. "And I don't want your excuses about stress. My father deals with more stress before his morning coffee than you deal with in a year. He's never struck an employee." Around them, the whispered conversations began, like rustling dry leaves. The attendees, the cream of New York society, were already rewriting the narrative. They were distancing themselves physically from Preston, creating a quarantine zone around the contaminated businessman. Phones were out, discreetly texting the breaking news to gossip columns and hedge fund managers alike. The rumor mill was already churning. Sterling is finished. Kensington's daughter was working undercover. He hit her. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the main entrance of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide with force. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. 4 men walked in first. They weren't hotel security in ill-fitting blazers. These men wore tailored charcoal suits that couldn't hide the bulk of body armor underneath. They moved with military precision, earpieces coiled tightly, eyes scanning the room for threats. They were Alexander Kensington's personal Praetorian Guard, ex-Mossad, rumored to be paid more than most bank CEOs. They fanned out, creating a secure perimeter, pushing back billionaires and heiresses without a word. Then, Alexander Kensington entered. At 62, he was still a towering figure. He didn't look like a banker. He looked like a retired general. He had a mane of thick, silver hair brushed back from a face carved from granite. His eyes, a piercing, icy blue, were legendary on Wall Street. They were eyes that could evaluate a company's worth in seconds and decide its fate in milliseconds. He wore a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than a mid-sized sedan, carried with an ease that suggested he was born in it. He didn't rush. The Iron Lion never rushed. He walked with a deliberate, terrifying calmness straight toward the center of the drama. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. People actually held their breath as he passed. Even the music, which had tentatively started up again, died out completely. Alexander didn't look at Preston Sterling. He didn't look at the crowd. His entire world was focused on the young woman in the black waitress uniform. He stopped 3 feet from her. His eyes softened, just a fraction, as he took in the sight of his only child. He saw the tired eyes, the cheap uniform, and then his gaze zeroed in on the angry red welt rising on her left cheekbone and the dried blood at the corner of her mouth. The jaw muscle in Alexander Kensington's cheek clenched so hard it looked like it might snap. A vein throbbed dangerously in his temple. "Maya," he said. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't angry, it was something far worse. It was the sound of absolute, destructive resolve. "Hi, Dad," Maya whispered, fighting the urge to cry now that safety had arrived. Alexander reached out a hand, large and manicured, and incredibly gently cupped the uninjured side of her face. It was a moment of shocking tenderness in the middle of a cold war zone. "Did you hurt anywhere else?" he asked, ignoring the 500 spectators. "My arm," Maya said quietly. "The guards. They were rough when they grabbed me." Alexander's eyes flicked to the 2 hotel security guards who had held her. They were currently trying to merge into the wallpaper, looking nauseous. "We will address that," Alexander promised. He looked back at her face, his thumb gently tracing the outline of the bruise Preston had left. You should not be here, little bird. You should be in your studio, drawing buildings. I wanted to do this on my own, Dad. I didn't want your help, she said, a remnant of her defiance remaining. And you have done admirably, Alexander said, his eyes hardening again. But when a rabid dog bites my daughter, I do not stand idly by. Slowly, deliberately, Alexander Kensington turned his attention away from his daughter and placed it squarely on Preston Sterling. Preston, who had been a titan of industry 10 minutes ago, now looked small, sweaty, and cheap. He tried to meet Alexander's gaze and failed miserably. "Alexander," Preston tried, his voice tight and high. "Mr. Kensington, it's an honor. I didn't know. Obviously. If I had known she was yours." "If you had known she was mine," Alexander interrupted, his voice terrifyingly calm, "you would have treated her with respect, which means you treat people based on who owns them, not on their inherent worth. That, Sterling, is why you are a second-rate gambler disguised as a businessman." Preston flushed a deep crimson. "That's not fair. I'm under immense pressure. The Kronos chip—" "Be quiet," Alexander commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of fact. "You will be quiet now." He stepped closer to Preston, invading his personal space, towering over him. "Let me be exceptionally clear about your current position, Mr. Sterling," Alexander began, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "My firm, Vanguard Capital, currently holds the primary lien on Ether Dynamics headquarters. We hold the debt for your recent acquisition of Omnicorp, and if I recall correctly, I personally hold the mortgage on that monstrosity of a yacht you currently have docked in Monaco." Preston pale. How do you know the specifics of my personal holdings?" Alexander smiled. It was a shark's smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Because I bought that debt this morning, Preston, just before lunch. I had a feeling your liquidity crisis was about to become public knowledge, and I enjoy distressed assets." A gasp rippled through the crowd. This was blood sport. Alexander hadn't just come to defend his daughter, he already owned his enemy. "I own you, Preston," Alexander whispered, leaning in so only Preston and Maya could hear. "I own the shoes on your feet and the scotch in your belly. And you just slapped the only thing in this world I actually care about." Preston looked like he was going to vomit. "Please, Alexander, what do you want? I'll do anything. I'll issue a public apology. I'll transfer stock to her. Name your price." Alexander straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. "My price? We are far past the point of negotiation, Preston. But before I systematically dismantle your life piece by piece, there is a matter of theft to resolve." He turned to the room, raising his voice slightly. "Mr. Sterling claims a prototype was stolen, a prototype that my firm technically paid for. So we are going to find it." Alexander snapped his fingers. His head of security stepped forward. "Lock it down," Alexander ordered. "No one leaves this ballroom. No one. Not the staff, not the guests, not the Japanese ambassador himself. Tell NYPD Commissioner O'Connell I need his best detectives here within 10 minutes. And tell him if he sends rookie cops, I'll have his pension fund audited." The security chief nodded and spoke rapidly into his wrist microphone. Immediately, the massive exit doors were sealed. Panic began to ripple through the high society crowd. Being told they couldn't leave was a novelty to people used to doing whatever they wanted. "Alexander, you can't hold us here," shouted a man near the front, a real estate mogul named Davies. "This is false imprisonment." Alexander turned his icy gaze on Davies. "Try to leave, Marcus. See what happens." Davies looked at the ex-Mossad guards blocking the doors, their arms crossed over their armored chests. He sat back down abruptly. "Now," Alexander said, turning back to the center of the room, "we are going to find this chip, and God help the person who actually has it, because my patience has already run out." The Obsidian Gala had transformed from the social event of the season into a gilded holding cell. An hour had passed. The champagne had stopped flowing. The band had packed up their instruments, looking nervously at the armed guards stationed at every exit. 500 of the world's wealthiest people were trapped, restless, and increasingly agitated. NYPD detectives, the real ones, not beat cops, were now on the scene. They moved through the crowd with grim efficiency, taking statements, but everyone knew who was really in charge. Alexander Kensington sat on a plush velvet chair brought to the center of the dance floor by a terrified busboy. Maya sat next to him, an ice pack held to her face. She had tried to go back to the kitchen, to hide, but Alexander wouldn't allow her out of his sight. Preston Sterling was pacing nearby, chugging water, his phone confiscated by Alexander's security team to prevent him from tampering with the market before the news broke officially. "Detective Vance," Alexander said, addressing the lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored pantsuit. "Status." Detective Vance didn't look intimidated, which Maya admired. "We've searched the immediate area of the collision. No chip. We've patted down the catering staff. With respect, sir," she added quickly, seeing Alexander's eyes narrow. "We are beginning preliminary interviews with the guests who were nearby." "Who was near him?" Alexander asked, looking at Preston with disdain. "Besides your daughter, there were several individuals," Vance said, flipping through her notebook. "A Ms. Veronica Croft, Mr. Silas Croft, Mr. Sterling's VP, and a Mr. Julian Thorpe." At the mention of Julian Thorpe's name, Maya sat up straighter. "Julian Thorpe," Maya said, her voice muffled slightly by the ice pack. "That's who I was dealing with when Preston ran into us." Alexander turned to her. "Dealing with? In what capacity?" Maya hesitated. She didn't want to sound like a victim again. "He was drunk. He was grabbing my arm. He was being inappropriate. I was trying to pull away from him when Mr. Sterling collided with us." Alexander's face darkened further. Another man who needed to be taught a lesson. "Thorpe, the media brat. Where is he?" Detective Vance scanned the room. "We spoke to him briefly. He seemed highly intoxicated. He's over near the bar area, I believe." Alexander stood up. "Bring him here. Now." While the detectives went to retrieve Julian, Preston tried another approach. He shuffled toward Alexander, looking contrite. "Alexander, look. If it was young Thorpe, the kid is a mess. Known drug issues, gambling debts. It makes sense. He probably saw an opportunity when I fell." Preston was eager to shift the narrative, to find a new villain. If he took it, then my accusation against Maya was a regrettable mistake based on proximity. "A mistake," Alexander repeated, his voice dripping with acid. "You ruined her face, Preston. That is not a mistake. That is assault." "I will make it right," Preston pleaded. "I swear." "You don't have enough capital left in the world to make it right," Alexander said dismissively. The detectives returned, virtually carrying Julian Thorpe between them. Julian looked worse than he had earlier. His bow tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and he was sweating almost as much as Preston. His eyes were darting around wildly, unable to focus. He reeked of expensive gin and something metallic like fear. "Get your hands off me," Julian slurred, trying feebly to shake off the detectives. "Do you know who my father is?" "Your father is a tabloid peddler who is currently leveraging his assets to keep his third network afloat," Alexander said, stepping into Julian's line of sight. "And you, Julian, are currently the primary suspect in corporate espionage and grand larceny." Julian blinked, trying to focus on the towering, silver-haired man. The recognition hit him slowly, like a heavy weight. "Mr. Kensington?" Julian squeaked. "Where is it, Julian?" Alexander demanded. "Where's what? I didn't do anything. I was just trying to talk to the pretty waitress." Julian leered clumsily at Maya, then paled when he saw the bruise on her face and the man standing next to her. "You were sexually harassing my daughter right before the theft occurred," Alexander corrected him cruelly, "which gives you motive and opportunity. You were right there." "No, I swear." Julian looked frantically at Preston. "Tell him, Preston. You ran into us. I didn't take your stupid chip." "Then empty your pockets," Alexander ordered. "You can't make me," Julian tried to bluster. "I have rights. You are on private property that I currently control, surrounded by police, accused of stealing from a man whose debt I own," Alexander said, stepping closer. "Your rights are currently theoretical, Julian. Empty your pockets." Julian was trembling. With shaking hands, he reached into his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a silver flask, a crumpled packet of cigarettes, and a heavy wad of cash. "See? Nothing!" Julian cried, throwing the items on a nearby table. Alexander looked at the items. Then he looked at Julian's trousers. They were well-tailored, tight-fitting dress pants. There was a slight bulge in the right front pocket that didn't look like keys. "The pants, Julian," Alexander said softly. Julian froze. His face went chalk white. It's just my phone." "Show me." Julian didn't move. He couldn't move. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. Preston Sterling saw the look on Julian's face. The realization hit him like a physical blow. It hadn't been the waitress. It hadn't been the person he beat down. It had been the rich kid standing right next to her. Preston lunged. Decades of repressed rage and the stress of the evening exploded. Preston grabbed Julian by the lapels and slammed him backward onto a round banquet table. Glasses shattered. Centerpieces flew. "You little parasite," Preston screamed, shaking Julian violently. "You took it. You stole my life." "Get off me!" Julian shrieked, flailing wildly. As they wrestled on the table, something fell out of Julian's trouser pocket. It was small, rectangular, and encased in a protective polymer sheath. It skittered across the polished dance floor, spinning under the lights. The Kronos prototype. The room went dead silent again. Preston stopped shaking Julian. He stared at the chip on the floor. He looked up at Maya, his eyes wide with horror at what he had done. He had been so sure, so arrogantly, violently sure. Maya lowered the ice pack, revealing the full extent of the ugly purple and red bruise covering the left side of her face. She looked from the chip on the floor to Preston Sterling. "Oops," Maya said dryly into the silence. "Guess you slapped the wrong nobody." The silence in the ballroom was broken, not by a voice, but by the mechanical click-hiss of handcuffs tightening. Julian Thorpe, the spoiled scion of a media empire, was weeping openly as Detective Miller, Vance's partner, hauled him off the floor. The Kronos chip, the piece of silicon worth $50 million, and the cause of all this misery, was sealed into an evidence bag. "I didn't mean to," Julian sobbed, his snot mixing with the tears on his expensive tuxedo. "I just wanted to see what it was. I was going to give it back." "Save it for the judge, kid," Detective Miller muttered, dragging him toward the exit. Preston Sterling stood alone in the center of the room. The space around him was empty. His allies, his business partners, even the people who had laughed at his jokes 10 minutes ago, had receded to the walls. He was radioactive. He looked at the chip in the evidence bag, then at Maya, and finally at Alexander Kensington. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him like a collapsing building. He hadn't just assaulted a waitress, He had assaulted the daughter of the man who held his financial lifeline, all while losing the one prototype that could have saved his company. "Alexander," Preston croaked. His voice was a shell of its former baritone boom. "You have the chip. It's found. No harm done, right? I will pay for Maya's medical bills. I will quadruple her tuition. Let's just go to the private study and discuss the mortgage terms." Alexander Kensington didn't even blink. He was checking his watch. "It is now 9:45 p.m., Alexander announced to the room, though his eyes never left Preston. "Do you know what happens at 9:45 p.m. in Tokyo, Preston?" Preston frowned, confused. "The markets open. What does that have to do with—" "Correct. The Tokyo markets have just opened," Alexander said pleasantly, as if discussing the weather. "And exactly 3 minutes ago, my brokerage firm in Singapore executed a massive sell order." Preston's knees began to shake. What did you sell?" "Everything," Alexander said. "I dumped every single share of Ether Dynamics my firm owned, 7% of your company, flooded the market." "You can't do that," Preston screamed, stepping forward, his hands trembling. "That will trigger a panic. The stock will tank. My loans are tied to the stock price." "I know," Alexander said coldly. "And since the stock price is currently plummeting, that triggers the margin call on your personal loans, the loans I own." Alexander took a step closer, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that only Preston and Maya could hear. "I am calling in the debt, Preston. All of it. Tonight. Immediate repayment." "I don't have the liquidity," Preston gasped. "You know I don't. If you call the debt, you bankrupt me." "That," Alexander said, "is the point." Preston looked around wildly for help. "This is illegal. This is market manipulation." "No," Alexander corrected him. "This is business. You are a volatile asset, Preston. You assault staff at charity galas. You lose proprietary technology. You are a bad investment. I am simply cutting my losses." Alexander turned to the lead detective. "Detective, Mr. Sterling admitted to striking my daughter. There are 300 witnesses and security footage. I would like to press charges for assault and battery." Preston's eyes bulged. "You can't arrest me. I'm the keynote speaker." "You're a criminal," Maya said. It was the first time she had spoken in 20 minutes. She stood up from the velvet chair, the ice pack lowered. Her face was a mess of purple and blue, but her posture was straight. She looked every inch the daughter of a titan. "You hit me because you thought I was weak," Maya said, her voice ringing clear in the hall. "You thought that because I was serving you food, I wasn't a person. You didn't just hurt me, Preston. You tried to erase me. And now, you're the one being erased." Preston lunged toward her, a last, desperate act of a cornered animal. "You little witch! You planned this!" He didn't make it 2 steps. Alexander's security detail moved with blurring speed. Before Preston could even raise a hand, he was face down on the marble floor, his arm twisted behind his back at a painful angle. "Get him up," the detective ordered. Preston Sterling, the man on the cover of Forbes, the man who believed he was a god among insects, was hauled to his feet. His white shirt was stained with wine and floor dust. His face was a mask of shock. As the officer clicked the handcuffs onto Preston's wrists, the sound echoed louder than the applause he had received earlier that night. "Preston Sterling," the detective recited, "you are under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent." As they dragged him away, passing the silent crowd of New York's elite, Preston locked eyes with Alexander one last time. "You'll lose money on this, Kensington," Preston shouted, desperate to land one blow. "Bankrupting me costs you millions." Alexander adjusted his suit jacket, looking bored. "I'd pay $1 billion to watch you fall," Alexander replied. And then Preston was gone. 3 days later, Maya sat on the balcony of the Kensington penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was a different world from her cramped apartment in Queens. The air here felt cleaner, quieter, but Maya didn't feel like she belonged here either. She was suspended between two lives, Maya, the waitress who struggled to pay rent, and Maya Kensington, the heiress to an empire. She touched her cheek. The swelling had gone down, but the bruise was currently a spectacular shade of greenish yellow. The glass door slid open, and her father stepped out. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee. Black for him, oat milk with 2 sugars for her. He remembered. "The doctors say the fracture is hairline," Alexander said, handing her the mug. "It will heal in a few weeks." "It hurts less today," Maya said, staring out at the skyline. "The news cycle is intense," Alexander noted, sitting in the wicker chair opposite her. He placed a tablet on the table. The headline of the New York Times business section read, "Fall of a Titan. Sterling Empire crumbles amidst assault scandal." Below it was a picture of Preston being shoved into a police car, looking deranged. Another article detailed the bankruptcy filing of Ether Dynamics. Preston's assets were being liquidated. The yacht in Monaco had already been seized. He was out on bail, but he was a pariah. No one would take his calls. "He's finished," Alexander said quietly. "He will never run a public company again." "Good," Maya said. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt tired. "Maya," Alexander said, leaning forward. The Iron Lion looked surprisingly vulnerable. "We need to talk about why you left." Maya sighed. She had known this was coming. "I didn't leave because I hate you, Dad. I left because I didn't want to be you." "Is being me so terrible?" Alexander asked, a wry smile on his lips. "It's lonely," Maya said honestly. "I watched you growing up. You have power, yes, but everyone around you is either scared of you or wants something from you. Preston Sterling, he was a monster, but he was also a product of this world. The money made him think he was untouchable. I was terrified that if I stayed, if I took the trust fund and the board seat, I'd become like that. Someone who doesn't see people, only net worth." Alexander looked down at his coffee. He remained silent for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Your mother used to say the same thing," he whispered. "Before she passed, she told me I was building a castle so high that no one could climb up to see me. I wanted to know I could survive on my own," Maya said, "that I was worth something without the name Kensington attached to it. When I was waitressing, my feet hurt, and the customers were rude, but the money in my pocket was mine. I earned it." "And you paid a high price for it," Alexander gestured to her face. "I did," Maya agreed, "but I also learned something. I learned that the people serving the champagne are stronger than the people drinking it." Alexander nodded slowly. "So, what now? Do you go back to Queens? To Gorski?" Maya laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Gorski called me 10 times yesterday. He's terrified you're going to sue the catering company into oblivion." "I was planning to," Alexander admitted. "Negligence. Failure to protect an employee." "Don't," Maya said. Alexander looked surprised. "Why?" "He almost fired you for being assaulted. Because if you destroy the company, 200 waiters and cooks lose their jobs. People who have rent to pay. People like me." Maya stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony. "I'm not going back to waiting tables, Dad. I'm finishing my architecture degree. But I'm not coming back to live in this penthouse either. I need to find my own middle ground." She turned to him. But I have a condition for not going back to Queen's immediately. Name it, Alexander said immediately. You buy the catering company, Maya said. Alexander blinked. I beg your pardon? Buy the catering company. Buy the agency that hired me. But don't shut it down. Make me the owner. Alexander smiled, and for the first time in years it reached his eyes. And what will you do with a mid-tier staffing agency, Maya? I'm going to change the rules, Maya said, her eyes flashing with a new kind of determination. Better pay, security that actually protects the staff, not just the guests, and a clause that says if a customer touches an employee, they get thrown out, billionaire or not. Alexander stood up and extended his hand. That sounds like a solid investment, but we'll need to draft a business plan. Maya took his hand. I'm free this afternoon. 1 year later, the charity gala season had returned to New York, and once again, the Pierre Hotel was buzzing with the energy of extreme wealth. But tonight, the atmosphere was different. The event was the New Horizons Architecture fundraiser, an event dedicated to providing scholarships for inner-city students entering the design field. At the center table sat Maya Kensington. She wasn't wearing an ill-fitting black uniform. She was wearing a structural, emerald green gown of her own design. Her hair was swept back, revealing a face that had healed completely, though the memory of the pain remained in the steeliness of her gaze. Next to her sat Alexander Kensington. He looked relaxed, laughing at something the person on his left said. He was still the Iron Lion, but his claws were sheathed. Maya, darling. A woman approached the table. It was the same woman in the Vera Wang dress who had snapped at Maya for still water a year ago. She clearly didn't recognize Maya. Wonderful event. The service is impeccable tonight. Maya smiled politely. I'm glad you think so, Mrs. Vanderbilt. We pride ourselves on our staff. The woman drifted away. Maya looked around the room. The waiters and waitresses moving through the crowd were efficient, professional, and, crucially, respected. They wore earpieces connected to a central security hub. Every few minutes, a floor manager would check in on them, not to scold them, but to ensure they were okay. This was Aegis Staffing, the company Maya had rebuilt from the ashes of Gorski's old operation. It was now the premier event staffing agency in the city. It cost triple to hire them, but the elite paid it. Why? Because it was owned by a Kensington. Maya caught the eye of a young waiter near the bar. He looked about 20, nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he balanced a heavy tray of martinis. He reminded her so much of herself. Suddenly, a loud voice erupted near the bar. I said, dry, this is swimming in vermouth. A heavy-set man in a tuxedo was berating the young waiter, poking him in the chest. The room went quiet. Old habits die hard. People watched, waiting to see the waiter crumble. Maya didn't freeze. She didn't look for her father. She stood up. She walked across the floor, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. She moved with the authority of a queen entering her court. She arrived at the bar just as the man raised his hand to shove the waiter's shoulder. Excuse me, Maya said. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. The man turned. He saw a beautiful woman in an expensive gown. He sneered. This doesn't concern you, sweetheart. The help is incompetent. The help, Maya said, stepping between the man and the waiter, is my employee, and you are trespassing. The man laughed. Trespassing? I paid $5,000 for this ticket, and I am revoking it, Maya said calmly. She tapped the small earpiece she now wore, disguised as a diamond earring. Security. Escort the gentleman at the bar out. Refund his ticket price to the charity. You can't do that, the man sputtered. Do you know who I am? Maya stepped closer. She looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of the lesson she had learned the hard way. "No," Maya said, "and I don't care. But if you touch him again, you'll be dealing with Alexander Kensington's daughter, and I promise you, I hit back harder than my father." The man paled. He looked at the security guards materializing around him, Maya's guards. He looked at Alexander Kensington, who was watching from the head table with a look of immense pride. The man lowered his hand. He turned and walked away, escorted by the guards. Maya turned to the young waiter. He was trembling. "You okay?" she asked gently. Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," he stammered. "I'm sorry about the drink." Maya smiled and picked up a napkin, helping him dry the tray. "Don't apologize for his bad behavior," she said. "Chin up, shoulders back. You're doing a job, not serving a sentence. You have value." She patted his shoulder and walked back to her table. As she sat down, Alexander poured her a glass of water. "You handled that well," he said. "I had a good teacher," Maya replied. "The waiter?" Alexander asked. "No." Maya took a sip of water. "The billionaire who slapped me. He taught me exactly what kind of person I never want to be." Preston Sterling was currently serving a 3-year sentence for fraud and assault in a minimum security facility upstate. Julian Thorpe was in rehab, and Maya Kensington was exactly where she belonged, sitting at the table, but always looking out for the ones standing in the shadows. Preston Sterling thought power was about how hard you could hit. He thought wealth gave him the right to treat people like furniture. He learned the hard way that true power isn't about dominance, it's about protection. Maya didn't just survive her humiliation, she used it to build a shield for others. In a world full of Prestons, be a Maya. Stand up, speak out, and remember, you never know who you're talking to, so treat everyone like they have a lion waiting in the wings. If this story got your heart racing, hit that like button to help us take down more entitled bullies. What would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about karma serving instant justice, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next story.